December 4th, 1872. Mid-Atlantic. The Canadian brigantine DEI Gratia spots something that shouldn't exist. A merchant ship, sails full, cutting through the waves, completely empty. No crew, no passengers, no bodies, just 10 souls who vanished without explanation. The Mary Celeste would become the most famous ghost ship in maritime history, but here's what really happened, and why after 150 years, investigators still can't explain it. Tonight, we're going back to where it all began, New York Harbor, November 7th, 1872. Before we sail into this mystery together, get comfortable, dim the lights. Let your mind drift back to 1872. If this story helps you sleep, hit subscribe and the bell icon. I'd love to know where you're listening from tonight, and what time it is where you are. Drop a comment below. There's something magical about sharing these historical moments across time zones. Some of you are watching sunrise, others deep in the night. Now, close your eyes. We're boarding the Mary Celeste. Chapter 1. Setting Sail into the Unknown. November 7th, 1872. New York Harbor buzzes with activity. Steam whistles, shouting dock workers, the smell of tar and salt spray. This is the golden age of sailing, when merchant ships carry the world's commerce across dangerous seas. Among the forest of masts, one ship prepares for what should be a routine voyage to Genoa, the Mary Celeste. She's not the biggest vessel here, not the newest, but she's seaworthy, and her captain knows these waters. Captain Benjamin Briggs stands on deck watching his crew load cargo. 37 years old, experienced. This isn't his first command, and it won't be his last, or so he thinks. Briggs comes from a maritime family. His father was a sea captain, his brothers sea captains. The ocean is in his blood, but today feels different. Today he's brought his wife Sarah and their 2-year-old daughter Sophia aboard. It's unusual, bringing family on a commercial voyage, but Sarah wants to see Italy. Sarah Briggs moves carefully across the deck, Sophia clinging to her skirts. She's excited about this adventure. The young mother has never been to Europe, never seen the Mediterranean. Benjamin promised her they'd explore Genoa together while the crew unloads their cargo. 1,701 barrels of commercial alcohol. Denatured spirits bound for Italian markets. It's valuable cargo, but not dangerous. At least that's what everyone believes. Sarah laughs as Sophia points at seagulls wheeling overhead. The sound carries across the harbor like music. The 7 crew members work efficiently. They trust Captain Briggs. He's fair but firm, knows his business. Albert Richardson, the first mate, has sailed with Briggs before. Good sailor, reliable. The Lawrenson brothers, Volkert and Boz, are experienced German seamen. Arian Martins handles the cargo. Edward Head and Gottlieb Gondeschol round out the crew. These aren't green sailors. They've crossed the Atlantic multiple times. They know storms. They know rough seas. None of them suspect they're loading cargo that might seal their fate. The Mary Celeste herself tells a story of American maritime ambition. Built in 1861 in Nova Scotia, originally named Amazon. She's had previous owners, previous names. Ships collect history like barnacles. But under Briggs' command, she's been profitable, reliable. She's 282 tons, 103 feet long, big enough for serious cargo, small enough to navigate tricky ports. Her hull is sound, her rigging tight. Today she's ready for the 3,000-mile journey to the Italian coast, if everything goes according to plan. But something feels off this morning. Maybe it's the grey November sky. Maybe it's the way the wind keeps shifting. Or maybe it's the weight of responsibility. Briggs has cargo worth thousands of dollars in his hold, his wife and daughter depending on him, a crew trusting his judgment. Every captain knows the sea doesn't forgive mistakes. One wrong decision, one moment of poor judgment, and everything changes. Still, the weather forecast looks good. The ship is ready. It's time to sail. As morning fog lifts from New York Harbor, other ships prepare for departure too. The DEI Gratia, another merchant vessel, will leave 8 days later bound for Gibraltar. Captain David Morehouse commands her. He knows Benjamin Briggs personally. They've shared drinks, swapped stories about life at sea. Neither man can imagine they'll meet again under the most mysterious circumstances in maritime history. For now, they're just 2 professional sailors making honest livings in dangerous waters. The sea connects them all. Sarah settles Sophia in their cabin, while Benjamin makes final preparations. The captain's quarters are comfortable but modest. A small table, narrow bed, trunk for personal belongings. Sarah has packed carefully, clothing for Italian weather, books for the long voyage, Sophia's favorite doll. She arranges things neatly, making this temporary space feel like home. Outside, she can hear the crew calling orders, preparing to cast off. The adventure is about to begin. She has no idea it will end in legend and mystery. The Mary Celeste's cargo hold contains more than alcohol barrels. There are personal belongings, ship supplies, navigation instruments, Benjamin's prized chronometer and sextant, tools that help captains find their way across empty oceans. Without them, a ship is lost. The alcohol itself sits in oak barrels, properly secured. Commercial-grade spirits bound for European markets. Nothing unusual about the cargo, nothing that should cause problems. But sometimes the most routine elements of a voyage become the most dangerous. Sometimes normal cargo kills. 11:30 a.m. Harbour pilot boards to guide them through New York's busy waters. The Mary Celeste's engine. Wait, she doesn't have one. Pure sail power. Captain and crew must read wind patterns, watch weather signs, navigate by stars and compass. It's 1872. Ships still depend on nature's forces and human skill. One mistake in judgment, one misread weather pattern, and voyages end in disaster. But Briggs is experienced. He's made this crossing before. The pilot helps them clear the harbour safely, then transfers to a small boat. Open ocean. The Mary Celeste sails fill with Atlantic wind. New York disappears behind them. Ahead lies 3,000 miles of empty sea. Benjamin stands at the wheel, feeling his ship respond to the waves. This is what he lives for. The moment when land falls away and only the ocean remains. Sarah and Sophia explore the deck while crew members adjust rigging. Everything feels normal. Routine. The kind of departure Briggs has experienced dozens of times. He has no reason to suspect this voyage will be different from any other. But the sea keeps its secrets close. Out here, beyond sight of land, strange things happen. Ships encounter weather that doesn't appear on any forecast. Currents that pull vessels off course. Phenomena that experienced sailors can't explain. The Mary Celeste sails into the unknown, carrying 10 souls toward a mystery that will baffle investigators for 150 years. Captain Briggs plots their course toward the Azores, then Genoa. He has no idea that in less than a month his ship will be found sailing empty through Atlantic waters. Chapter 2. Into the heart of the Atlantic. November 8th, 1872, second day out from New York Harbor. Mary Celeste cuts through dark Atlantic swells, her bow splitting foam that catches moonlight. Captain Benjamin Briggs stands at the helm, watching his compass needle swing. Behind him, the rhythmic creak of rigging. Below deck, Sarah rocks baby Sophia to sleep while 7 crew members settle into their bunks. Everything normal, everything routine, but the Atlantic has its own plans brewing. Life aboard a merchant ship, it's all routine. Up at dawn, check the rigging, trim the sails, maintain course. The men know their jobs. Captain Briggs runs a tight ship but fair. No drinking, no gambling, prayers on Sunday. His wife Sarah keeps to the cabin mostly, little Sophia playing with wooden blocks on the floor. The cargo hold, 1,700 barrels of commercial alcohol, bound for Genoa. Nothing unusual about that. Ships carry stranger things across these waters all the time. November 12th. The log entry reads, "Weather fair, wind steady from the southwest." Captain Briggs writes in his careful script. Position noted, course maintained, everything by the book. But here's what gets me. Experienced captains like Briggs. They can sense things, changes in the wind, shifts in the sea, the way birds fly, the color of the water. All those years at sea, they develop instincts, and somewhere deep down, maybe he's already feeling it. Sarah Briggs keeps a small diary. Nothing dramatic, just daily life aboard ship. Sophia took her first steps on deck today, made bread pudding for the crew. Benjamin teaching her to whistle like the wind. Normal family moments. But she also writes about the crew, how quiet they've gotten, how they glance at the sky differently. She doesn't understand it yet. But sailors, they have superstitions, and some of them are starting to feel uneasy. The Atlantic in November. It's not forgiving. Grey swells stretching to the horizon. Water cold enough to kill you in minutes. But Mary Celeste handles it well. She's a solid ship, built in Nova Scotia. 100 feet long, sturdy oak timbers. The kind of vessel that's crossed these waters 1,000 times. Her crew knows every creak, every groan. When something sounds different, they notice. And lately, things have been sounding different down in the cargo hold. November 18th. They're making good time. The Azores, still days away. Captain Briggs takes his daily readings. Sextant, chronometer, compass bearing. Navigation is precise work. One mistake, and you're lost in thousands of square miles of ocean. He plots their position carefully on the chart, makes his calculations twice. Everything checks out. But here's the thing about the sea. It doesn't care how good your calculations are. It has its own mathematics. The cargo, 1,700 barrels of denatured alcohol. Raw, commercial-grade stuff. Not for drinking, it's poisonous. But it's flammable. Highly flammable. The crew knows this. They're careful with lanterns, with pipes. No open flames near the hold. It's standard procedure. But alcohol, it doesn't just burn. It gives off fumes, invisible vapors that can build up in enclosed spaces. And lately, some of the barrels have been weeping. Small leaks. Nothing major. Nothing to worry about. Yet, November 22nd. Captain Briggs notices it first. The smell. Faint alcohol vapors drifting up from the cargo hold. He checks the manifest, inspects the barrels. A few have small leaks where the wood has shrunk in the sea air. Normal for this kind of cargo. But the smell, it's getting stronger. The crew notices too. They start avoiding the forward hold unless absolutely necessary. Nobody talks about it directly, but there's tension building, unspoken worry. Sarah keeps Sophia away from the hold now. Woman's intuition maybe, or just common sense. But little Sophia doesn't understand why Daddy looks worried when he comes up from below deck. Why Mommy holds her tighter during storms. Why the sailors whisper to each other and stop talking when the family approaches. Children sense these things. The atmosphere aboard ship, it's changing. Still professional, still disciplined. But underneath, there's something building. November 24th. Weather turning rough. Not dangerous yet, but the swells are building. Wind gusting from different directions. Captain Briggs checks his barometer. Pressure dropping. Storm coming. Maybe a big one. He orders the crew to secure loose cargo, double-check the rigging, standard storm preparation. But with those alcohol fumes, any spark, any friction, any static electricity, well, let's just say storms make sailors nervous, even without 1,700 barrels of flammable liquid sloshing around below deck. The chronometer sits in the captain's cabin. Precision timepiece, essential for navigation. Without accurate time, you can't calculate longitude. You're lost. The sextant hangs nearby, for measuring the sun's angle, determining latitude. These instruments, they're a sailor's lifeline. Captain Briggs checks them religiously. But here's what's strange. In just a few days, both will vanish, along with everything else, as if the sea itself reached up and claimed them. November 25th. The last log entry. Captain Briggs writes, "At 8 o'clock, made the island of St. Mary bearing east-southeast. The Azores. They've spotted land. Should be routine from here, but the handwriting looks different. Hurried. Not his usual careful script. Like something's wrong. Like time is running short. But there's no explanation. No mention of problems. Just the position. The bearing. And then, nothing. The pen stops moving. The story goes silent. What happened next? Nobody knows. The logbook closes. The story disappears into empty ocean. But think about it. Experienced captain, solid ship, calm weather near land. Everything should be routine. Yet within hours, maybe minutes, 10 people vanish without a trace. No distress signal. No struggle. No bodies. Just an empty ship sailing on autopilot toward its date with history. The Atlantic keeps its secrets well. And this one's kept for 150 years. December 4th approaches. 9 days of silence. Mary Celeste sails on, ghostly, purposeless, carrying her cargo toward an appointment with destiny. Captain David Morehouse of the DEI Gratia is out there somewhere, following the same shipping lanes. 2 ships, both experienced crews, both making routine Atlantic crossings, neither knowing their names will be linked forever in maritime history, neither knowing that in a few short hours, one mystery will create a legend that time itself cannot solve. Chapter 3. The eeriness sets in. December 4th, 1872. Another grey morning on the Atlantic. Captain David Morehouse stands on the deck of his brigantine, DEI Gratia, scanning the horizon through his spyglass. Then he sees something that makes his blood run cold. A ship, sailing alone, moving, wrong, erratic, like a drunk man stumbling home. It's maybe 6 miles off, close enough to make out the distinctive lines of an American merchant vessel, close enough to see no one at the helm. Morehouse knows ships, been sailing these waters for 20 years. And something about this vessel, it's not right. The way it moves, too loose, too aimless. Ships don't sail themselves, especially not in December waters, 400 miles east of the Azores. His crew gathers around him, following his gaze. They see it too. That unnatural drift, that empty quality. Old sailors have a word for ships like this, ghost ships, and every man on deck feels that ancient chill crawling up his spine. Through the spyglass, Morehouse can make out more details. American flag flying upside down. No weight, right side up, but hanging limp. No distress signal, no crew visible on deck. Just emptiness. The ship's name comes into focus as they draw closer. Mary Celeste. Morehouse knows that name. Knows the captain too. Benjamin Briggs. Good man. Experienced sailor. So where the hell is he? Where's his crew? Why is his ship wandering the Atlantic like some lost soul looking for home? The Mary Celeste drifts closer. Close enough now to see the rigging hanging loose. Sails half furled, some missing entirely. But here's what gets me. There's no damage. No signs of a storm. No broken masts or shattered railings. Just abandonment. Like everyone simply vanished mid-task. Morehouse's crew exchanges glances. These are hardened sailors. Men who've seen everything the ocean can throw at them. But this feels different. This feels wrong in ways they can't name. Morehouse makes the call. They're going aboard. Maritime law demands it, salvage rights, investigation, basic human decency. But his crew hesitates. Nobody wants to be first over that rail. Ghost ships carry curses, old sailors say. Doom follows those who disturb the dead. Superstition? Maybe. But out here, 400 miles from anywhere, with that empty vessel rolling in the swells beside them, superstition feels a lot like wisdom. Still, duty calls. Someone has to look. 3 volunteers. Oliver DeVoe, the first mate, John Wright, John Johnson. They lower a boat, row across that small stretch of ocean that feels like crossing into another world. The Mary Celeste looms above them, silent as a grave. No voices calling down, no faces at the rail, just the creak of empty rigging and the slap of waves against the hull. They tie off and climb aboard, and the moment their feet hit that deck, they know. Something terrible happened here. The silence hits them first. Not just quiet, empty. The kind of silence that echoes. They call out, "Hello? Anyone there?" Their voices swallow up in that vast emptiness. No answer. Not even the scurry of rats. Ships always have rats. Always. But not this one. This ship feels hollow. Dead. Like something sucked the life right out of it. DeVoe signals back to DEI Gratia. All clear, he motions. But his face tells a different story. Nothing about this is clear. They split up, checking every inch. The deck tells no story, no blood, no signs of struggle, no bodies, just absence. Ropes coiled neat in some places, hanging loose in others, like work stopped mid-motion. A few hatches stand open, the longboat's missing. That's something. Maybe they abandoned ship, but why? The vessel seems sound, cargo holds intact, she's riding steady in the water. So what spooked 10 people badly enough to take their chances in an open boat? Down in the captain's quarters, DeVoe finds the most unsettling scene of all. Everything neat, orderly, personal belongings still in place. Captain Briggs's charts spread on his table, his daughter's toys arranged just so, and on the small table, breakfast dishes, set but barely touched, coffee gone cold, bread still sitting there, like the family just stepped out, planned to come right back. But where did they go? And why leave a perfectly good meal to get cold? The crew quarters tell the same story. Bunks made, personal items in their places, pipes still packed with tobacco, one sailor's oilskins hanging on a peg like he just took them off. Everything suggests normal life, then sudden absence. No fight, no panic, no hasty packing, just gone. 10 people don't simply evaporate. But looking around this empty ship, floating alone in the middle of the Atlantic, that's exactly what it looks like happened. They check the cargo hold. 1,700 barrels of commercial alcohol, most still sealed. A few empty, but that could be normal evaporation. No sign of an explosion, no fire damage. The alcohol's flammable, sure, but it's not like it was leaking everywhere. Ship's pumps work fine. She's taking on water, but not much. Nothing that would sink her. Nothing that would panic an experienced crew into abandoning a perfectly seaworthy vessel. So what the hell happened here? Back on deck, they find more puzzles. The chronometer's missing, navigation instruments gone, but not stolen, taken deliberately, like someone gathered the essentials before leaving. The ship's log sits open, final entry dated November 25th. 9 days ago. Just routine notes about weather and position. Nothing urgent, nothing alarming. Then, silence. 9 days of empty pages. 9 days of this ship sailing herself across the Atlantic like some maritime phantom, carrying her secrets with her. The boarding party signals back to DEI Gratia. Ship abandoned. All souls missing. Cargo intact. No signs of violence. As those words carry across the water, every man on both vessels feels it. That ancient maritime dread. The sea's oldest mystery. Ships that sail without crews. Vessels that become ghost stories. The Mary Celeste joins their ranks now. A perfectly good ship, with a perfectly inexplicable absence at her heart. And somewhere out there, 10 people who simply vanished into legend. They secure the Mary Celeste for towing. Salvage law says she belongs to whoever brings her in, but nobody celebrates. There's no joy in claiming a ghost ship, just duty, and questions, endless questions that will haunt investigators for decades. What made Captain Briggs abandon a seaworthy vessel? Where did 10 souls go in the middle of the Atlantic? And why does this empty ship feel so much like a grave? Some mysteries. The sea keeps forever. This might be one of them. Chapter 4. The Unseen Sword and the Mystery of the Missing Lifeboat. Something's wrong. I mean, beyond the obvious fact that 10 people just vanished. Captain Morehouse is standing on Mary Celeste's deck, and his crew, they're getting jumpy. Real jumpy. Because the deeper they look, the weirder this gets. It's not just that everyone's gone, it's what they left behind, and what they took. The details that don't add up. The questions that multiply with every door they open. First thing that hits them, the lifeboat's gone. Not damaged, not torn loose by waves, just missing. Clean as you please. The davits are still there, rigging intact. Someone deliberately lowered that boat into the water. But here's what gets me about this. Captain Briggs knew these waters. He knew his ship. Why would he order 10 people into a single lifeboat in the middle of the Atlantic? What scared him that badly? What did he see that we can't? Morehouse is trying to think like a captain. Like Briggs. You don't abandon ship unless you absolutely have to. The Mary Celeste seaworthy. She's got food for months. Water barrels are full. So what made Briggs think the ocean was safer than his own deck? The DEI Gratia crew is whispering among themselves now, shooting glances at their captain. Because they're sailors. They know the rules. And the first rule is, you never leave your ship unless it's sinking. Then they find the sword. Just lying there in Captain Briggs's cabin. Steel blade with dark stains along the edge. And I'll tell you what every man on that deck is thinking. Blood. Has to be blood. Right? Violence. Murder. Some kind of struggle that explains everything. The crew's looking at each other differently now. Morehouse orders them to bag it carefully. Evidence. Because if there was a fight, if someone killed the captain, then where are the bodies? Where are the killers? But wait. There's no other signs of violence. No bullet holes. No broken furniture. No bloodstains anywhere else. The cabin's neat, orderly. Sarah Briggs' sewing still folded on the table. Little Sophia's toys arranged just so. If someone murdered this family, they cleaned up awful well afterward. Morehouse is experienced enough to know that violence leaves traces. Lots of traces. And this ship, it's telling a different story. A stranger story. One that doesn't make sense yet. The nervousness is spreading through his crew like fog. They're jumpy, whispering, crossing themselves when they think nobody's looking. Because sailors are superstitious, and this feels wrong, feels cursed. One of them mutters something about ghost ships, about vessels that sail themselves. Morehouse shuts that down fast, but you can see it in their eyes. The fear, the question they're all thinking. What if we're next? What if whatever took the Mary Celeste's crew is still here? Morehouse makes a decision that will change everything. He's claiming salvage rights. That means sailing this ghost ship to Gibraltar with a skeleton crew, leaving his own vessel to follow behind. It's dangerous. It's probably crazy, but it's also potentially the most profitable decision of his life. A ship this size, cargo this valuable, could set him up for years, if they make it to port alive, if whatever happened here doesn't happen again. Big if. He picks 3 men for the salvage crew. Oliver DeVoe, his first mate, Charles Lund, John Wright, all experienced sailors, all volunteers, because nobody's ordering anyone to sail this thing. They know the stories. Ships that lose their crews don't always want new ones. But these men, they're practical. They need the money, and they figure whatever happened, it happened to landlubbers. A woman and child aboard. Captain's family. Sailors know better. Sailors survive. The transfer happens fast. Supplies, navigation equipment, personal effects they'll need for the journey. But every time someone goes below deck, they come back up quick. There's something about the silence down there, the way their footsteps echo, the feeling that they're not alone. Even in broad daylight, with the sun beating down, the Mary Celeste feels cold, feels empty in a way that goes deeper than just missing people, like something essential got sucked right out of her. Defoe takes charge of the Mary Celeste, sets a course for Gibraltar, 800 miles of open ocean with a crew of 3, and a ship that might be cursed. The DEI Gratia follows at a distance, close enough to help if something goes wrong, far enough away to, well, to run if they have to. Because Morehouse is smart, he knows this could go sideways fast, and if it does, he's not losing his ship and crew too. First night out, Defoe barely sleeps. Every creak of the rigging sounds like footsteps. Every shift in the wind sounds like voices. He keeps checking the other bunks, making sure Lund and Wright are still there, still breathing. Because part of him expects to wake up alone, to become the next mystery. The Mary Celeste doesn't feel like a ship anymore. It feels like a trap, a beautiful seaworthy trap that's already claimed 10 lives. Maybe more. The sword keeps bothering him. Those dark stains that look so much like blood, but something's nagging at his mind. Something about the color, the pattern. He's seen plenty of blood in his time. Fights, accidents. This doesn't look right. Too uniform. Too rusty. Wait, rust. Could it be that simple? Salt air corroding steel, making ordinary oxidation look sinister. He wants to believe that, needs to believe that. Because the alternative doesn't bear thinking about. Day 3 into the salvage journey, they're making good time. The Mary Celeste handles like a dream despite everything. She wants to sail, wants to reach port. Maybe that's good. Maybe that means whatever happened, it's over. Past tense. But Defoe can't shake the feeling that they're being watched. Not by the DEI Gratia trailing behind, by something else. Something that doesn't want them to reach Gibraltar. Something that wants the Mary Celeste to keep her secrets. As Gibraltar comes into view, Defoe allows himself to breathe. They made it, all 3 of them. The Mary Celeste didn't claim any more victims. But now comes the hard part. Questions, investigations, salvage hearings. And somewhere in all of that, maybe answers. About the missing lifeboat. About the sword that wasn't bloodstained after all. About what really happened to 10 people who simply vanished into Atlantic mist. The mystery isn't over. It's just beginning. Chapter 5. Unraveling the Gibraltar Hearing. December 18th, 1872. Gibraltar. The Mary Celeste sits at anchor, waiting. 14 days since Captain Morehouse brought her in, claiming salvage rights. But the British authorities, they're not buying it. Frederick Solly Flood, the Attorney General, has questions. Big ones. Why would 10 people abandon a perfectly seaworthy ship? How convenient that Morehouse just happened to find her. The whispers start immediately. Insurance fraud. Murder. Conspiracy. And David Morehouse. He's about to face the fight of his life. Here's what you need to understand about maritime law in 1872. Find an abandoned ship, bring her to port. You're entitled to salvage money, serious money. The Mary Celeste and her cargo, worth about $46,000. That's over $1 million today. But there's a catch. The salvage has to be legitimate. No fraud, no foul play. And Solly Flood, he's convinced something stinks about this whole story. The hearing begins, and every word Morehouse says will be picked apart, analyzed, questioned. Morehouse takes the stand first, tells his story. Left New York November 15th, 8 days after the Mary Celeste. Spotted her December 4th. Sailing erratically. Sent a boarding party. Found her abandoned. Seems straightforward, right? Wrong. Flood hammers him with questions. Why didn't you signal her sooner? Why not try to communicate? How convenient you found her just when you needed water. Every answer Morehouse gives sounds more suspicious. The courtroom tension is thick. This isn't going well. Then comes the physical evidence. That bloody sword everyone's talking about? Turns out it's rust. Not blood. The ship's condition? Better than expected. No signs of violence. No signs of struggle. But Flood fixates on the missing cargo. Some barrels of alcohol are empty. Others show signs of tampering. He's building a theory. Morehouse and Briggs conspired together, planned this whole thing. Kill the crew. stage an abandonment, split the insurance money. It's a compelling theory, except for one problem. The problem is Benjamin Briggs himself. This isn't some desperate captain drowning in debt. Briggs is successful, respected, financially stable. He owns shares in the Mary Celeste. His wife and 2-year-old daughter are aboard. Why would he fake his own death? Why abandon his investment? Why risk his family? Morehouse's lawyer hammers this point, but Flood isn't convinced. He thinks they found a way to get Sarah and Sophia off the ship safely, hidden them somewhere. This whole thing is an elaborate performance. The DEI Gratia crew testifies next. First Mate Oliver DeVoe describes the boarding, the Mary Celeste's hold, 3.5 feet of water sloshing around, the mainsail blown away, rigging damaged, but she's still seaworthy, still sailing. They pump her out, patch what they can, sail her to Gibraltar. DeVoe's testimony is detailed, consistent, but Flood keeps pressing. Did you see any other ships? Any boats? Any signs of life anywhere? The answers are all the same. Nothing. Just empty ocean. Here's where it gets interesting. The Mary Celeste's cargo manifest shows 1,701 barrels of commercial alcohol. But when they inventory in Gibraltar, 9 barrels are empty. Not damaged. Empty. Flood seizes on this. The alcohol was stolen, sold, converted to cash, part of the conspiracy. But the alcohol expert testifies that commercial alcohol isn't drinkable. It's poisonous. Industrial grade. You can't sell it for drinking. Flood's theory starts looking shaky, but he's not giving up. The missing lifeboat becomes crucial evidence. Every witness agrees it's gone. Davits show it was launched, not torn away by weather. Someone deliberately lowered it. But why? Flood suggests it was used to transfer people to another ship, part of the conspiracy. But others argue it proves desperation. Something scared them so badly they abandoned ship in the middle of the Atlantic. In winter, in a small boat. That doesn't sound like a plan. That sounds like panic. The ship's chronometer is missing. So is the sextant. Navigation instruments. Worth money, sure, but more importantly, essential for finding your way at sea. If this was a planned abandonment, why take them? If you're faking your death, you don't need to navigate. But if you're genuinely lost, genuinely fleeing some danger, those instruments could save your life. It's a small detail, but it suggests real desperation. Not conspiracy, not fraud, fear. Weeks drag on. Testimony after testimony. The court examines every inch of the Mary Celeste, every detail of the discovery. Flood brings in handwriting experts to analyze the ship's log, looking for signs of forgery, gaps, alterations. They find nothing suspicious. The last entry, November 25th, shows the ship 6 miles off Santa Maria Island in the Azores. Weather fair, all normal. Then, silence. 10 days until Morehouse found her. 400 miles northeast. What happened in those 10 days? The strain on Morehouse and his crew is visible. They came forward as good Samaritans, expecting reward for their salvage work. Instead, they're treated like criminals, suspected of murder. The newspapers pick up the story, and public opinion turns ugly. Anonymous letters arrive at their homes. Threats, accusations. Their families suffer. Their reputations crumble. All because they did what any decent sailor would do: rescue an abandoned ship. The price of doing right keeps getting higher. Maritime law in 1872 assumes the worst about human nature at sea. Ships disappear, crews vanish, and usually there's money involved. Insurance fraud is common enough that every unusual case gets scrutinized. The system is designed to catch conspirators, but it also punishes the innocent. Morehouse learns this the hard way. His salvage claim, worth thousands, hangs in the balance. But more than money, his honor, his reputation, his future as a sea captain. Everything depends on convincing these judges. Finally, after 3 months of testimony and investigation, the court reaches its decision. No evidence of conspiracy, no evidence of fraud. The Mary Celeste was genuinely abandoned, and the DEI Gratia crew acted properly in claiming salvage. But the court is still suspicious. Instead of the usual salvage award of half the ship's value, they award Morehouse only £1,700, about 1/6 of what he expected. It's a compromise verdict. Legal vindication, but financial punishment for their suspicions. The hearing ends, but the questions don't. Flood never stops believing in his conspiracy theory. He'll spend years trying to prove fraud, writing letters, investigating leads that go nowhere. The Mary Celeste mystery deepens, because the legal process, designed to find truth, only highlights how little anyone actually knows. 10 people vanished without explanation. The sea kept its secret, and a good man's reputation was nearly destroyed for trying to do the right thing. Justice isn't always just. Chapter 6. The spawning of wild theories. The Gibraltar hearing ended. The official verdict? Inconclusive. No fraud proven. No clear explanation found. And that's when things got interesting. Because when you leave a vacuum like that, when you give people a mystery with no neat answers, human imagination rushes in to fill the void. What came next wasn't careful analysis or methodical investigation. It was pure speculation. Wild, bizarre, sometimes completely insane theories that would define the Mary Celeste legend for the next century and a half. First theory to surface? Mutiny. Made sense on paper. 7 crew members against 1 captain, his wife and a toddler. Maybe the men got desperate. Maybe they wanted that alcohol cargo for themselves. The story went like this. Crew rises up, kills the family, dumps the bodies overboard, then somehow escapes in the ship's boat. But wait, if you just committed triple murder and theft, why leave behind 1,700 barrels of valuable alcohol? Why abandon a perfectly good ship? The math didn't add up. Then came the pirate theories. Atlantic pirates boarding the Mary Celeste, slaughtering everyone aboard. Then, what exactly? Leaving the cargo behind? Sailing away in a tiny lifeboat instead of a perfectly functional brigantine. Some versions had the pirates getting spooked by something supernatural and fleeing in terror. Others claimed they were interrupted mid-robbery by another ship. But here's the thing about pirates. They don't leave money on the table. They don't abandon valuable ships. They certainly don't tidy up the captain's cabin before they go. Murder by crew got darker. Specific crew members were named as killers. Stories emerged of gambling debts, personal vendettas, secret criminal pasts. One theory claimed the German crew members were actually undercover agents planning to steal the ship for foreign powers. Another suggested the cook had poisoned everyone, then panicked and jumped overboard. These stories had names, motives, detailed scenarios. They also had zero evidence. But evidence wasn't the point anymore. Drama was the point. Headlines were the point. The truth? That was negotiable. And then, sea monsters. Oh yes, we went there. Giant squid attacks became a popular explanation. Picture this massive tentacled beast rising from the depths, wrapping around the Mary Celeste, plucking people off the deck one by one. The crew fighting back with whatever they could find. That sword they discovered with the reddish stains. Battle wounds from fighting the creature. When the beast retreated to the depths, it took the bodies with it, leaving behind only an empty ship and the lingering smell of the deep ocean. Completely insane. Completely captivating. Underworld connections started surfacing too. Captain Briggs supposedly had gambling debts to dangerous people. The cargo of alcohol wasn't innocent cargo. It was payment for criminal services. When Briggs couldn't deliver, mob enforcers boarded the ship, eliminated everyone, and made the bodies disappear. Some versions had Briggs faking his own death to escape debt collectors. Others claimed he was running weapons alongside the alcohol. The Mary Celeste wasn't a merchant vessel. It was a floating criminal enterprise that finally got caught. Problem was, Benjamin Briggs had an spotless reputation. The alcohol fumes theory actually made some sense. 1,700 barrels of commercial alcohol in the hold. Those fumes build up, get concentrated, become explosive. One spark, one lantern knocked over, one moment of static electricity, and the whole ship becomes a floating bomb. Theory went like this. Fumes reached dangerous levels. Captain Briggs ordered everyone into the lifeboat temporarily, planning to return once the air cleared. But something went wrong. The tow rope snapped. They were stranded at sea, watching their empty ship sail away. This one was actually plausible. But plausible wasn't enough for some people. They wanted stranger explanations. Alien abduction, time portals, Bermuda Triangle effects, extending into the Atlantic, dimensional rifts that swallowed the crew while leaving the ship behind, ghost ships from parallel universes, ancient curses on the cargo. Some claimed the Mary Celeste had been blessed or cursed by indigenous shamans before it ever left port. Others insisted the ship itself was haunted, driving its occupants mad until they jumped overboard rather than stay aboard another moment. The theories got wilder by the week. Newspapers loved it. Each new theory sold papers. Each bizarre explanation grabbed readers by the throat and wouldn't let go. Journalists weren't investigating anymore. They were creating entertainment. Headlines screamed about ghost ships and sea monsters and mysterious disappearances. Facts got twisted, embellished, completely fabricated. That neat captain's cabin became a scene of violent struggle. Those empty alcohol barrels became evidence of drunken mutiny. The routine final log entry became an ominous warning about approaching doom. Truth was the casualty. Sensation was the product. The public ate it up. This wasn't just a maritime mystery anymore. It was mass entertainment. People gathered in bars, parlours, town squares, spinning their own theories. Everyone had an explanation. Everyone knew what really happened. The Mary Celeste became a social phenomenon, a shared obsession that let ordinary people feel like detectives, like they could solve what the experts couldn't. It was participatory storytelling on a massive scale, and the more outlandish the theory, the more attention it got. Reasonable explanations were boring. Impossible explanations were irresistible. But let's pause here. Let's look at what we actually knew. Ship found sailing alone. No signs of violence. Cargo mostly intact. Personal belongings undisturbed. Lifeboat missing. That's it. That's the entire mystery. Everything else, the hot meals, the warm tea, the half-finished letters, the captain's wife sewing still on the table, later embellishments. Fictional details added to make the story more compelling. The real Mary Celeste was far less dramatic than the legendary Mary Celeste. But the legendary version? That's what people wanted to believe. Why did people need these wild theories? Because the truth, whatever it was, probably wasn't that interesting. Probably wasn't that mysterious. Probably just tragic. 10 people died at sea. Happens all the time. Has happened for thousands of years. Will keep happening, as long as humans sail oceans. But admitting that means admitting we don't control everything. That experienced captains make fatal mistakes. That the sea takes who it wants when it wants without explanation or apology. The theories weren't about solving the mystery. They were about avoiding that uncomfortable truth. The disconnect between evidence and imagination was complete. Physical facts pointed to a relatively mundane maritime disaster. Crew abandons ship temporarily. Something goes wrong. They're lost at sea. But the public narrative demanded something more. Something worthy of the headlines. Something that justified all this attention. So the story grew, evolved, mutated into something barely recognizable. The Mary Celeste wasn't just an abandoned ship anymore. It was a symbol. A blank canvas where people could paint their deepest fears and wildest fantasies about what lurks beyond the horizon. And somewhere in all this noise, all these competing theories and sensational headlines and wild speculation, the real story got buried. The actual facts became footnotes in their own mystery. 10 real people who lived real lives and died real deaths became fictional characters in an ongoing drama. Captain Benjamin Briggs, devoted family man and experienced mariner, became a murderer, a criminal, a victim, a ghost, depending on which theory you preferred. The truth wasn't exciting enough, so they created something that was, and that fabricated version, that's what most people still believe today. Chapter 7. Sifting rationality from myth. Alright, let's pump the brakes here. We've wandered through sea monsters and supernatural theories, but Captain Briggs was a practical man. He wouldn't abandon his wife and 2-year-old daughter for ghost stories. So what really happened out there? Time to strip away the maritime folklore and look at this thing with clear eyes. Because the truth, it's probably way more mundane than legends suggest. But that doesn't make it less tragic. First theory that actually makes sense: alcohol fumes. Mary Celeste was carrying 1,701 barrels of commercial alcohol. Raw, industrial-grade stuff. Now, 9 of those barrels were found empty when the DEI Gratia crew boarded. Not missing, empty. Think about what happens when alcohol evaporates in a ship's hold. Invisible, odorless fumes building up. One spark, one lantern flame, and boom, the whole ship becomes a floating bomb. Briggs would have known this risk. Picture this scenario. Briggs notices the empty barrels. Maybe hears them sloshing differently during a routine check. He smells something. Feels that tingle in the air that means trouble. The fumes are building. Every sailor knows alcohol vapor is invisible death. So he makes a snap decision. Load everyone into the ship's boat. Stay connected with a tow line. Wait for the fumes to clear. Simple precaution. Smart seamanship. What could go wrong? Here's what could go wrong. Everything. Atlantic Ocean in November. 20-foot swells. That tow line connecting the ship's boat to Mary Celeste? It's just rope. Strong rope, but still rope. One big wave, one sudden jerk, one frayed spot nobody noticed. Snap. Now Captain Briggs is watching his ship drift away. His wife, his daughter, 7 crew members in an open boat, miles from land, no way to get back aboard. The math is brutal here. Ship's boat versus Atlantic Ocean. The boat was missing when DEI Gratia found Mary Celeste. Never recovered. 10 people in a small wooden craft, hundreds of miles from shore, late November weather. Even if they'd packed supplies, how long could they last? This theory explains everything. The abandoned ship, the missing boat, why nobody survived to tell the story. It's horrible and simple, and probably exactly what happened. But wait, there's another rational explanation. Waterspouts. These things are basically tornadoes over water, and they can appear out of nowhere in the Atlantic. November 1872 was a particularly stormy season. A waterspout could have hit Mary Celeste suddenly, violently enough to terrify everyone into the boat. Or maybe it actually lifted people right off the deck. Sounds crazy, but waterspouts have been documented doing exactly that. Seaquakes are another possibility nobody talks about. Underwater earthquakes that can hit a ship like a massive fist. The vessel lurches, groans, feels like it's breaking apart from below. Briggs might have thought the hull was compromised, ordered everyone into the boat while he assessed damage. Then, snap goes the tow line again. Same tragic ending, different cause. The Atlantic doesn't care why you end up in a small boat. Now let's puncture some myths that have grown around this story. The legend says rescuers found hot tea still steaming, breakfast half-eaten, bread still fresh. Complete nonsense. The ship had been drifting for 9 days when DEI Gratia found her. Nothing stays hot for 9 days. These details were added later by storytellers who thought reality wasn't dramatic enough. The truth was actually more unsettling, everything normal, just empty. Another myth. The supposed blood-stained sword. Investigation proved it was rust, seawater and iron, basic chemistry. But newspapers loved the bloody sword angle, because it suggested violence, murder, pirates. More exciting than metal object got rusty on ocean voyage. Same with the supposed claw marks on the ship's rails. Weathering, salt corrosion, the sea itself leaving scratches, not some desperate struggle. Reality is usually less theatrical than we want. The cargo tells us something important too. If pirates had attacked, why leave 1,700 barrels of valuable alcohol? If the crew mutinied, why abandon their prize? If sea monsters were involved, well, sea monsters would probably eat the cargo too, right? The fact that everything valuable remained untouched points to sudden emergency evacuation. People fleeing something immediate and terrifying. But fleeing what? Here's what gets me about rational explanations. They're actually scarier than ghost stories. A sea monster is something you can fight or flee from. But alcohol fumes, invisible, odorless death waiting for one spark. A broken tow line, just physics and bad luck. The ocean doesn't need supernatural help to kill people. It does that fine all by itself, thank you very much. The evidence supports temporary abandonment gone wrong. Missing ship's boat, missing navigation equipment, chronometer, sextant, stuff you'd grab if planning to return. The last log entry shows routine sailing conditions. No distress, no panic. Whatever happened came fast. Too fast for proper preparation. Too fast for a goodbye message. Just grab essential gear, get everyone in the boat, hope for the best. But here's the thing about applying pure logic to the Mary Celeste. It still leaves questions. Why didn't experienced sailor Briggs use a stronger tow line? Why abandon a seaworthy ship for a small boat in rough weather? Why no distress signals? Rational explanations answer the how, but not always the why. The human decisions that turned precaution into catastrophe. The split-second choices that doomed 10 people. So we've sifted through the evidence, separated fact from maritime folklore. Most likely scenario: alcohol fumes forced emergency evacuation. Tow line snapped, 10 people lost to the Atlantic. Simple, tragic, human. No ghosts required. But even rational explanations can't bring back Captain Briggs, his wife, his daughter, or the 7 crew members. The sea kept them. And sometimes, that's the only mystery that matters. The moment word reached New York that the Mary Celeste had been found empty, the search began. Not just any search. A frantic, desperate hunt spanning 2 continents and every port between here and Gibraltar. Captain Briggs's shipping company sent telegrams to every harbour master from Boston to Barcelona. Have you seen 10 people? A man, his wife, their little girl, 7 sailors? Anyone? The silence that came back was deafening. But the families, they weren't ready to give up. Not yet. Back in Marion, Massachusetts, Sarah Briggs's family was holding on to hope like a life preserver. Her brother Arthur paced the docks every morning, scanning the horizon for sails. Her mother Frances wrote letter after letter to shipping offices, consulates, anyone who might listen. My daughter Sarah was aboard the Mary Celeste with her husband and baby, she'd write, her handwriting getting shakier with each attempt. Please, have you heard anything? The postmaster knew her by sight now. Captain Briggs's mother, Sophia, was 71 years old. Too old for this kind of heartbreak. She'd already buried her husband, lost other children to disease and accident. But Benjamin was her steady one. Her sea captain's son who always came home. She sat by her window in Wareham, watching the road that led from New Bedford harbour. Every rider, every wagon, every stranger walking past might be bringing news, good news. Please God, let it be good news. The crew families were the forgotten ones in all this. Albert Richardson's wife barely had money for food, let alone telegrams to European ports. Volkert Lorenzon's family back in Germany couldn't even read the English newspapers reporting the mystery. They waited in a different kind of darkness. No shipping company connections, no influential friends, just hope and prayer, and the growing gnawing certainty that their boys weren't coming home. But hope dies hard in a sailor's family. By January 1873, the search had gone global. Consuls in Spain, Portugal, Morocco, harbour masters in Italy, France, Greece. Every American ship captain was given descriptions. Benjamin Briggs, 37, brown hair, commanding presence. Sarah, 30, auburn hair, travelling with a 2-year-old girl named Sophia. 7 crew members, ages ranging from 23 to 56. Surely someone, somewhere, had seen them. A family travelling together stands out. A woman with a baby, people remember that. Then came the false hopes. A telegram from Cadiz. American family matches description, inquiring. Hearts stopped. Hands trembled opening that follow-up wire. Wrong family, different ship. A report from Lisbon. Sailors fitting description found work on Portuguese vessel. Another dead end. Each disappointment hit like a physical blow. Frances Cobb aged years in those weeks, grey creeping through her hair like frost. Arthur's wife begged him to stop checking the telegraph office every hour. Spring came to New England. Ice broke up in the harbours. Ships that had wintered over began their voyages again. And still, nothing. The families started facing a horrible truth. The ocean is vast beyond imagination. If 10 people went into lifeboats somewhere between the Azores and Portugal, they could be anywhere, or nowhere. The Atlantic doesn't give up its dead easily. Sometimes it doesn't give them up at all. The search was becoming less about finding them, and more about accepting they were gone. Picture this. You're looking for 10 people somewhere in an area the size of Texas. Except it's not land, it's water. Moving water. With currents and tides and storms that could push a lifeboat hundreds of miles off course. And this is 1873. No radio, no airplanes, no satellites. Just sailing ships and steamers following established routes. If you drift outside those shipping lanes, you might as well have sailed off the edge of the world. The ocean becomes your entire universe. The letters started changing tone around summer. Less desperate hope, more preparation for the worst. Frances Cobb's handwriting grew careful, measured. We continue to pray for news of our dear Sarah and little Sophia, she wrote to the American consul in Gibraltar. But between the lines, you could read her growing acceptance. The questions weren't, have you found them anymore? They were becoming, will we ever know what happened? The shift from rescue to simply knowing, understanding, closure. By autumn, the crew families had stopped expecting their boys home for harvest. The Richardsons planted a smaller garden. Lorenzon's mother in Germany lit candles for the dead instead of the living. These were practical people. They understood the sea's mathematics. A year lost at sea means death. There's no maybe about it. No romantic desert island rescue. Just water, cold and final. But the Briggs family, they held on longer. They had more resources, more connections, more stubborn hope. The shipping community in New Bedford tried to help. Other captains' wives visited Sophia Briggs regularly, brought food, sat quietly while she stared out that window. They knew what she was going through. Every sailor's family lives with this possibility. The sea takes men. Sometimes it takes whole ships. It's the price of making your living on water. But knowing doesn't make it easier when it's your son, your daughter-in-law, your grandbaby who was just learning to walk. December 4th, 1873. 1 year exactly since the Mary Celeste was found drifting empty. The date nobody wanted to acknowledge, but everybody remembered. Frances Cobb finally stopped writing letters to European consuls. Arthur stopped scanning the horizon every morning. The telegraph office in Marion knew they wouldn't be seeing the Briggs family anymore. Sophia, the old woman by the window. She kept watching the road, but even she knew deep down that no rider was coming with good news. The final acceptance came quietly. No dramatic moment. No official declaration of death. Just silence settling over the waiting families like snow. Bills needed paying. Life needed living. Other ships were sailing. Other sailors were coming and going. The world moved on because the world always moves on. But in Marion, Massachusetts, and in a dozen small towns where the Mary Celeste's crew had family, there were empty chairs at dinner tables, rooms that stayed exactly as they'd been left. 10 people sailed into mystery and never sailed out. Somewhere between the Azores and eternity, they vanished completely. The search for them became part of their story, all those desperate letters, all that waiting and hoping and finally accepting. The families learned what every sailor's family eventually learns. Sometimes the sea keeps its own, forever. And the hardest part? The not knowing. Were they afraid at the end? Did they think of home? The ocean holds those answers now. Always will. Chapter 9. The Haunting Spirit of Mary Celeste. Gibraltar, 1873. The mystery ship sits in port like a pariah. Nobody wants her. Word spreads fast in maritime circles. This is the ghost ship. The vessel where 10 souls vanished without explanation. But ships cost money. And money talks louder than superstition. Eventually someone bites. New owners. Fresh papers. Different name on the stern. But you can't just paint over a reputation like that. Sailors know. They always know. And Mary Celeste? She's about to sail again. The salvage hearing's over. Legal questions settled. Mary Celeste gets sold to a consortium of Italian merchants for £1,200. Bargain price for a seaworthy vessel. They rename her. New registration. Fresh coat of paint. But the dock workers whisper as they load her cargo. The longshoremen cross themselves. Even in Genoa, where superstition runs deep as the Mediterranean, this ship carries weight. Heavy, invisible weight. The kind that settles in your bones when you step aboard. Her new captain? He needs the work. Captain Marco Torriani takes command in 1874. Experienced sailor, 20 years at sea. He's heard the stories but dismisses them as sailor nonsense. Ships don't carry curses, he tells his nervous crew. Wood and iron, canvas and rope, nothing more. But 3 days out of port, strange things start happening. Tools go missing. Ropes fray in perfect weather. Men report footsteps on deck during night watch. Nobody there when they look. Torriani keeps his doubts private. Can't afford to lose his crew to fear. The first voyage under Italian ownership. Almost the last. Heavy weather hits them off Sardinia. Nothing unusual for October in the Mediterranean. But the crew swears the ship fights them. Helm won't answer properly. Sails tear for no reason. Torriani works double shifts because his men keep finding excuses to avoid night duty. They make port in Naples 2 weeks late. Half the crew jumps ship immediately. Won't even collect their pay. Just want off. Torriani spends a month finding replacements. Nobody asks why. Word spreads through Mediterranean ports. Mary Celeste, she's trouble. Sailors share stories in taverns. Phantom sounds below decks. Cold spots in the captain's cabin. Dreams of a woman and child calling for help. The practical captains laugh it off publicly. Privately, they cross her name off their lists. Insurance companies start asking questions. Premiums climb. The Italian owners find themselves stuck with a ship nobody wants to sail. But commerce demands movement. Cargo needs transport. Someone always needs the money badly enough. 1876. New captain. Giuseppe Rossetti. Desperate for work after losing his previous command to gambling debts. Takes Mary Celeste without hesitation. His crew, bottom of the barrel. Men with nowhere else to go. First mates are drunk. Cooks hiding from creditors. Able seamen who can't get berths on respectable vessels. Perfect crew for a cursed ship, Rossetti jokes. But he stops joking 3 nights out when his compass starts spinning like a child's top. No magnetic disturbance on the charts. Just Mary Celeste being Mary Celeste. The incidents pile up. Cargo shifting in calm seas. Water barrels going dry overnight. Charts disappearing from the navigation table. Rossetti finds himself checking the ship's boat obsessively. Still there, still secure. But for how long? His predecessor's log mentions similar fears. The boat. It's always about the boat. Last escape route. Final option when everything goes wrong. Rossetti starts sleeping with his life jacket on. His crew notices. Fear spreads like fever among sailors. Once it starts, hard to stop. Mediterranean shipping agents develop an unofficial Mary Celeste policy. Higher rates, hazard pay, double insurance. Some ports refuse her entirely. Superstition's bad for business. But lost ships are worse. The owners grow frustrated. This vessel should be profitable. Good bones, sound construction. Instead, she's bleeding money like an open wound. They consider cutting losses, selling for scrap, but pride keeps them trying. Italian merchants don't surrender easily. Maybe the next captain will be different. Maybe the curse is just coincidence. 1879. Captain Antonio Morelli, young, ambitious, doesn't believe in ghosts, takes Mary Celeste on a Barcelona run with full confidence. His journal tells the real story, though. Day 3. Strange dreams about a woman and child. Day 7. Crew reporting voices from empty cabins. Day 12. Compass problems again. By day 15, Morelli's writing like a man at the end of his rope. Last entry mentions abandoning ship if conditions don't improve. They make port. Barely. Morelli quits shipping, opens a bakery instead. The pattern's clear now. Mary Celeste drives people away. Not through violence, through unease. Persistent, growing dread that something's fundamentally wrong. Scientists would call it psychological, mass hysteria, suggestion feeding on itself. But try explaining that to sailors pulling double watches because their shipmates won't take night duty. Try telling that to captains who wake up checking if their families are still breathing. The sea's big enough for rational explanations. It's also big enough for things that don't have explanations. By 1884, Mary Celeste's reputation precedes her into every port. Harbour masters recognize her silhouette. Dock workers find sudden urgent business elsewhere when she needs loading. The Italian owners finally admit defeat. They're bleeding money faster than a punctured hull. Time to cut losses. But who buys a cursed ship? Enter Gilman Parker, Boston sea captain with debts and desperation in equal measure. He sees opportunity where others see omens. Buys Mary Celeste cheap. Has plans for her. Dark plans. Parker loads Mary Celeste with worthless cargo. Barrels of water disguised as alcohol. Rotting wood passed off as lumber. Fake manifests. Inflated insurance claims. His plan's simple. Wreck her deliberately. Collect the money. End the curse permanently. He recruits a crew of desperate men. Promise of easy money overcomes superstition. January 1885. They sail from Boston toward Haiti. Mary Celeste's final voyage. This time someone's actually planning to abandon ship. But the sea has other ideas about how stories end. January 3rd, 1885. Rochaloa Reef, Haiti. Parker deliberately runs Mary Celeste aground. Plans working perfectly, until it isn't. Insurance investigators arrive faster than expected. They examine the cargo, find the fraud immediately. Parker's arrested, tried for insurance fraud and barratry. The cursed ship that drove honest captains to despair finally catches a dishonest one. Irony thick as Caribbean humidity. Parker goes to prison. Mary Celeste sits on the reef, waves pounding her hull to pieces. Slowly, inevitably, finally getting her rest. The sea takes Mary Celeste apart piece by piece. Hull planks, rigging, masts, everything that made her a ship returns to the elements. Local fishermen avoid the reef, say they see lights there on moonless nights, hear voices calling across the water. Maybe it's true, maybe it's just stories growing in the telling. But Mary Celeste's physical journey ends here, broken apart by Caribbean waves. Her legend, that's just beginning. Some ships sink and are forgotten, others become eternal. Mary Celeste chose eternity. Chapter 10. The expansion of a seafaring legend. Here's the part that honestly breaks my heart a little. All those facts we've been piecing together, the careful investigation, the reasonable theories, the real human tragedy of the Briggs family and their crew. Watch what happens next. Because Mary Celeste was about to become something else entirely. Not a maritime mystery with logical explanations. Not a story about real people who died. A monster. A marketing opportunity. Entertainment. The transformation didn't happen overnight. But by the 1880s, something had shifted. Newspaper editors discovered that ghost ship stories sold papers. Pulp fiction writers found that mysterious disappearances made great plots. And somewhere along the way, the truth started getting flexible. Mary Celeste wasn't just abandoned anymore. She was cursed. She wasn't just empty when found. She was still warm with breakfast on the table. None of that was true. But truth wasn't selling stories. Arthur Conan Doyle lit the match in 1884. The guy who created Sherlock Holmes wrote a short story called J. Habakkuk Jepson's Statement, changed the ship's name to Mary Celeste, added a vengeful passenger with a dark secret, turned a real maritime tragedy into fiction. And here's what gets me. People started believing his made-up version was the real story. The fiction became more famous than the facts. Literature had officially hijacked history. Then came the embellishments. Oh, the embellishments. Tea still steaming in cups, half-eaten meals still warm on plates, personal belongings scattered as if people vanished mid-action. None of this appeared in the original testimony from 1872. The DEI Gratia crew never mentioned hot food or fresh tea. But these details were so much more dramatic than we found an empty ship with some missing lifeboats. So they stuck, and spread, and became gospel. By the early 1900s, Mary Celeste had become a brand. Every unsolved disappearance got compared to her. Every abandoned vessel became another Mary Celeste. The name alone conjured images of supernatural dread. Maritime insurance companies started using her as a cautionary tale. And somewhere in all this myth-making, the real story, Captain Briggs bringing his family on what should have been a routine voyage. That story got buried under layers of sensational nonsense. Hollywood got its hands on her in the 1930s. The Mystery of the Mary Celeste, starring Bela Lugosi. Now, she wasn't just cursed, she was a murder ship. Bodies piling up, screaming, violence, everything the real investigation had specifically ruled out. But scary sells tickets, and suddenly millions of people knew Mary Celeste as a horror story, not a maritime mystery. The transformation from tragedy to entertainment was complete, and frankly it was disgusting. The folktales multiplied like maritime cancer. Sailors started claiming they'd seen her still sailing the Atlantic. Ghost ship sightings became regular newspaper features. Every unexplained light on the horizon, every trick of fog and moonlight, became the Mary Celeste returning to claim more victims. She'd become exactly what maritime superstition feeds on, a vessel that refused to die. A ship that had transcended the physical world and become pure fear. What really stings is how completely the entertainment industry abandoned any pretense of respecting the facts. Television shows, novels, documentaries, they all perpetuated the same debunked myths. Hot meals, warm tea, people vanishing into thin air. Even when historians tried to correct the record, the false version was too embedded in popular culture. Truth had become boring compared to the legend, and the Briggs family's real story got lost completely. By the 1960s, Mary Celeste had entered the realm of paranormal investigation. UFO researchers claimed alien abduction. Ghost hunters declared her the most haunted ship in history. Psychics offered to commune with the missing crew. Each new theory got wilder and further from the maritime disaster she actually was. The rational explanations, alcohol fumes, temporary abandonment gone wrong, couldn't compete with interdimensional portals and time rifts. The internet age made it worse. Every conspiracy website, every unsolved mystery forum, every paranormal blog recycled the same fabricated details. The story became a game of telephone played across centuries. Each retelling added new impossible elements while stripping away more verified facts. Mary Celeste became less a ship and more a symbol, a blank canvas for whatever supernatural explanation people wanted to project onto maritime history. Here's what bothers me most. We had a real mystery, a genuinely puzzling case with multiple plausible explanations. Human drama, real stakes, a family lost at sea. But that wasn't enough for the entertainment machine. It needed something bigger, more sinister. So it manufactured supernatural elements that never existed and discarded the human elements that made the story actually meaningful. Commerce corrupted curiosity. Sensationalism strangled truth. The transformation complete. Mary Celeste now exists more as mythology than history. She's referenced in everything from video games to horror novels. Each mention reinforces the false narrative. Kids grow up knowing her as the ship where breakfast was still warm and people vanished into thin air. They don't learn about Benjamin Briggs or his family. They don't hear about the alcohol cargo or the missing lifeboats. They get ghost story instead of human story. And maybe that tells us something important about how we process mystery. When faced with something we can't fully explain, we seem compelled to make it supernatural rather than simply unsolved. We'd rather have impossible answers than admit we don't know everything. Mary Celeste became famous not for what actually happened to her, but for what we imagined happened. The legend consumed the truth so completely that most people can't separate them anymore. So there she sails through popular culture, the Mary Celeste that never was, forever haunted by crimes that never happened, cursed by supernatural forces that never existed, carrying passengers who vanished in ways that defied physics. She's become the most famous ghost ship in history by abandoning everything that made her story real in the first place. Entertainment won, truth lost. And frankly, we should all feel a little disappointed about that. Chapter 11. The Legend That Endures. Here's what gets me about the Mary Celeste story. It's been 150 years. We've solved crimes from ancient Rome. We've decoded languages that died with civilizations. We've figured out how the pyramids were built. But this one ship, this one December morning in 1872, still stumps us. And maybe that's exactly why we can't let it go, because some part of us doesn't want to solve it. Think about it. Every culture on Earth has ghost ship stories. The Flying Dutchman, the Kalusha off Chile, Japan's ghost fleet from World War II. We've been telling these tales since we first built boats and watched them disappear beyond the horizon. But Mary Celeste? She's different. She's not folklore or legend passed down through generations. She's documented, photographed, real, and that makes her infinitely more terrifying and fascinating. There's something in human psychology, call it the narrative imperative. We need stories to have endings, closure, resolution. When a movie cuts to black without explaining what happened, we feel cheated. When a book leaves questions unanswered, we write angry reviews. We're wired to want completion. But the ocean doesn't care about our need for neat endings. It keeps its secrets, always has, always will. Anthropologists have studied this for decades. Why do unsolved mysteries capture us so completely? It's not just curiosity. It's deeper than that. It's about control, about believing we can figure anything out if we just try hard enough. Mary Celeste challenges that belief. She sits there in maritime history like a puzzle piece that doesn't fit anywhere. And instead of accepting that, we keep trying to make it fit. Look at how the story evolved. The facts weren't dramatic enough, so we added hot meals still steaming on the table, tea still warm in cups, clothes hanging out to dry. None of it true, but it felt true. It felt like what should have been there. We turned a maritime mystery into a ghost story, because ghost stories make more sense than nothing, than just emptiness and questions without answers. There's a sociological term for this: apophenia, the human tendency to find patterns and meaning in random information. We see faces in clouds, we hear voices in static, we create conspiracy theories because random chaos is more frightening than organized evil. Mary Celeste became our pattern, our meaning, a way to impose narrative on the vast indifferent ocean that doesn't owe us explanations for anything. And here's the beautiful paradox. The more we try to solve Mary Celeste, the more mysterious she becomes. Every theory raises new questions. Every explanation leaves holes. It's like trying to catch water with your hands. The harder you squeeze, the more it slips through your fingers. Maybe the mystery isn't what happened to those 10 souls. Maybe the mystery is why we need to know so badly. Carl Jung wrote about the collective unconscious, shared symbols and stories that appear across cultures without contact. The ghost ship might be one of these. A vessel sailing without its crew represents something primal, something about journeys we take alone, about destinations we reach empty-handed, about the gap between departure and arrival where life just disappears. Mary Celeste became our collective nightmare made real. What fascinates me is how the story adapted to each generation. In the 1870s, she was evidence of divine judgment. The 1920s made her a prohibition cautionary tale. The 1950s saw UFO abductions. The internet age brought time portals and Bermuda Triangle theories. Each era dressed her in its own fears and obsessions. She became whatever we needed her to be, our mirror on the water. There's something almost religious about unsolved mysteries. They require faith. Faith that answers exist somewhere, even if we can't reach them. Faith that the universe makes sense, even when it clearly doesn't. Mary Celeste has become a kind of shrine to that faith, a place where believers and skeptics come to worship at the altar of the unknown, where we're all equally humbled. I've been researching maritime mysteries for years. Dozens of ships, hundreds of disappearances. But Mary Celeste? She's the one that stays with you. Maybe because she's so perfectly maddeningly incomplete, like a symphony missing its final movement, like a painting with the corner torn off, beautiful and broken and forever asking, what if you could see the rest? What if you knew? The rational part of my brain knows the most likely explanation. Alcohol fumes, fear of explosion, temporary abandonment that became permanent when the lifeboat rope snapped. But there's another part. The part that still checks for monsters under the bed sometimes, that wants something more. Something worthy of 150 years of wondering. Something that honors those 10 vanished souls with appropriate mystery. Maybe that's what Mary Celeste really teaches us. Not about maritime safety or cargo hazards or the dangers of the Atlantic in 1872. Maybe she teaches us about ourselves, about our relationship with the unknown, about how we handle questions without answers, about the space between what we know and what we wish we knew, the space where all the best stories live. In the end, Mary Celeste endures because she represents something eternal, the mystery we can't solve, the door we can't open, the horizon we can't reach. She's our reminder that for all our technology and knowledge and scientific method, the world still holds secrets. The ocean still whispers stories we'll never fully hear, and sometimes that's exactly as it should be. Chapter 12. A final attempt at unraveling. Here we are, nearly 150 years later, and we're still trying to solve this thing, still turning over the same evidence, the same possibilities, hoping something new will click into place. But maybe that's the wrong approach. Maybe instead of hunting for the one perfect answer, we should sit with what we actually know. Look at the most reasonable theories, see how they stack up against the facts, and accept that some mysteries resist solving. Let's start with the theory that makes the most sense to me. The alcohol fumes. Remember, Mary Celeste was carrying 1,701 barrels of commercial alcohol, denatured ethanol bound for Italy. Now 9 of those barrels were found empty when DEI Gratia's crew boarded. 9 barrels worth of alcohol vapor, potentially building up in the hold, in November, in the middle of the Atlantic. Think about what Captain Briggs would be smelling down there. Picture this. Briggs goes below deck for a routine cargo check. Opens the hatch, gets hit with these powerful alcohol vapors. Maybe there's condensation from the barrels, maybe some seepage. The smell would be overwhelming. And Briggs, he's an experienced captain. He knows what alcohol fumes can do. He's seen ships blow apart from cargo fires. One spark from a pipe, a lantern swinging the wrong way. Boom, everything gone. So what does a smart captain do? He gets everyone off the ship, fast, orders the lifeboat prepared, moves his wife, his 2-year-old daughter, his crew to a safe distance. Maybe they're planning to let the fumes dissipate, then return. Maybe they're going to tow the Mary Celeste until the danger passes. This isn't panic, it's prudence, a calculated decision based on real risk. But then something goes wrong. Now let's consider the sea itself. November in the North Atlantic isn't exactly cruise weather. The area near the Azores where Mary Celeste was found, it's known for sudden weather changes, waterspouts, rogue waves that appear out of nowhere and disappear just as fast. What if something like that hit while they were in the lifeboat? Something that left the main ship untouched but swallowed 10 people without a trace. Seaquakes are another possibility. Underwater earthquakes that can create massive pressure waves. You wouldn't see it coming. One moment you're floating beside your ship, waiting for the all clear. The next, the ocean floor shifts hundreds of miles below, and the water around your small boat turns violent. The Mary Celeste, being larger and more stable, rides it out. The lifeboat doesn't stand a chance. Or maybe it was something simpler. A sudden squall. The kind of localized storm that kicks up fast and dies just as quickly. 15-foot swells in every direction. Your rope breaks. The one connecting your lifeboat to the Mary Celeste. Now you're in a tiny boat with a toddler, watching your ship drift away in the chaos. No matter how hard you row, you can't catch up. The current takes you one way, the ship another. Here's what gets me about the abandonment theory. It explains everything we found and everything we didn't. The ship's boat was missing. That's a fact. The chronometer and sextant were gone too. Navigation instruments you'd absolutely take if you were leaving the ship, even temporarily, even if you planned to come back. No captain abandons ship without knowing where he is and what time it is. The cargo tells a story too. Some alcohol barrels were empty, but the rest were intact. No systematic looting, no signs that anyone spent time going through valuable cargo. This wasn't piracy or mutiny. It was evacuation. Quick, organized, but evacuation nonetheless. Take the people, take the navigation tools, take the lifeboat, leave everything else behind. Plan to return when it's safe, but never get the chance. The cabin evidence supports this too. Captain Briggs's breakfast was there, but not hot, not steaming. That detail about finding fresh tea and warm food? Pure legend. What they actually found was a cabin that looked lived in but abandoned. Papers scattered by wind coming through an open skylight. Water damage from spray. A ship that had been sailing empty for days, maybe weeks. So which theory fits best? Honestly, they all fit parts of the puzzle. The fume theory explains why they'd leave a seaworthy ship. The natural disaster theory explains why they never returned. The abandonment gone wrong theory ties it all together. Maybe it wasn't one thing. Maybe it was a cascade. Fumes force evacuation, then weather prevents return. Multiple small decisions that add up to tragedy. But here's what we can't explain. Why no bodies were ever found. Not on beaches, not floating, not anywhere. 10 people don't just vanish without leaving some trace. Unless the Atlantic was particularly hungry that day. Unless the currents and the depth and the sea creatures conspired to erase every last bit of evidence. The ocean is vast, and it doesn't give up its secrets easily. After 150 years of theories, investigations and wild speculation, maybe this is as close as we get. A reasonable explanation that accounts for most of the facts. Captain Briggs made smart decisions with incomplete information, protected his family from perceived danger, and then the sea, unpredictable and merciless, claimed them all. Not because of supernatural forces or elaborate conspiracies, just because sometimes the most honest answer is the hardest one to accept. We don't know. We may never know. The Mary Celeste sailed away from her people, and her people disappeared into the Atlantic, and that's where the story ends. In uncertainty. In questions that have no final answers. And maybe there's something appropriate about that. Some mysteries are meant to stay mysterious. Chapter 13. Deciphering the ghost ship's legacy. Here's what gets me about the Mary Celeste. It's been 150 years since that ship was found drifting empty. Captain Briggs, Sarah, little Sophia, the 7 crew members, they're all long gone. But their story? It's more alive now than it ever was when they were breathing. That abandoned brigantine didn't just sail into maritime history. It sailed straight into our nightmares, our books, our movies, our collective unconscious. The Mary Celeste became something bigger than wood and canvas. It became the ghost ship. Within a decade of that Gibraltar hearing, writers were already spinning tales. Arthur Conan Doyle wrote a story called J. Habakkuk Jeffson's Statement in 1884. Completely fictional, but people believed it was real. He added details that never happened. Breakfast still warm on the table, tea steaming in cups. None of that was true, but it stuck. That's how legends work. They improve the facts. They make the story better than reality, more haunting, more perfect. And once those embellishments take root, they become the truth people remember. Hollywood grabbed hold of the story and never let go. Films, TV shows, documentaries, each one adding their own spin. Aliens, time warps, Kraken attacks, murder plots. The Mary Celeste became a blank canvas for every maritime horror story anyone ever wanted to tell. And here's the thing. Each retelling took the story further from those 10 real people who vanished that day. Sarah Briggs became a character instead of a mother. Captain Briggs became a plot device instead of an experienced mariner who made one fateful decision we'll never understand. The Mary Celeste created the template for every ghost ship story that came after. The Flying Dutchman was cursed to sail forever. The Mary Celeste just sailed empty. Somehow that was worse, more unsettling, because it could happen to anyone. No curse required. Just bad luck, bad timing, and the sea's refusal to give up its secrets. Every abandoned vessel found since 1872 gets compared to the Mary Celeste. It became the measuring stick for maritime mysteries, the gold standard of inexplicable disappearances, the ship that defined what it means to be haunted by absence. But here's what bothers me most about how this story evolved. Somewhere in all the retellings and theories and supernatural speculation, we lost sight of the human cost. 10 people died. A 2-year-old girl never got to grow up. A mother never saw another sunrise. 7 sailors never made it home to their families. The Mary Celeste became famous for being empty, but it wasn't supposed to be empty. It was supposed to be full of life, laughter, conversations, the everyday sounds of people living their lives on the ocean. Instead, it became a symbol of absence. Think about that for a second. This ship is loaded with stories we'll never hear. Sarah probably sang lullabies to Sophia during rough weather. The crew had inside jokes, complaints about the food, letters they planned to write when they reached Genoa. Captain Briggs kept a mental list of improvements he wanted to make to the ship. All those human moments, gone. The Mary Celeste drifting empty isn't just mysterious, it's heartbreaking, because a ship without its people isn't really a ship at all. It's just wood and metal and canvas, carrying cargo to nowhere. Maritime folklore grabbed the Mary Celeste and wouldn't let go. Sailors started seeing ghost ships everywhere after 1872. Any vessel that looked abandoned, any ship sailing erratically, any unexplained sighting at sea got compared to the Mary Celeste. It became the archetype that every maritime ghost story referenced. Dock workers would whisper about ships that appeared and vanished. Fishermen reported vessels that shouldn't have been there. The Mary Celeste created a lens through which every ocean mystery got interpreted. It made the impossible seem possible, made the sea feel more dangerous and unknowable than it already was. Modern interpretations of the story keep evolving. Paranormal investigators use electromagnetic readers aboard replica ships. Documentary crews dive the waters near the Azores, looking for evidence that was never there. Historians debate whether Captain Briggs would have panicked over alcohol fumes or weather. But here's the thing. Each generation reinvents the Mary Celeste to match their own fears. In the 1950s it was aliens. In the 1980s it was government cover-ups. Now it's climate change and rogue waves. The story adapts. It survives because it reflects whatever we're afraid of at the moment. Why are we still fascinated by this story 150 years later? Because it represents something fundamental about the human condition. We need to know what happened. We need closure. We need stories to make sense. But the Mary Celeste refuses to give us that satisfaction. It just sits there in history, unsolved and unsolvable. And that drives us crazy. We've sent people to the moon, mapped the human genome, split the atom, but we can't figure out why 10 people abandoned a perfectly good ship in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. It's humbling. The empty ship became a metaphor for everything we don't understand about life. How many times have you felt like you were drifting without direction? Like something essential was missing, but you couldn't name what? The Mary Celeste taps into that feeling. It's a ship without a soul, sailing without purpose, carrying cargo that will never reach its destination. That resonates with people. We all have moments when we feel like ghost ships ourselves, going through the motions, but somehow hollow inside, present but not really there. The Mary Celeste mirrors that existential emptiness back to us. What the Mary Celeste represents about mystery itself is profound. In our age of surveillance cameras and GPS tracking and satellite monitoring, the idea that 10 people could just vanish without a trace seems impossible, but it happened. And it reminds us that the world still has secrets, that some questions don't have answers. That mystery isn't just about what we don't know yet, it's about what we might never know. The Mary Celeste is proof that reality sometimes refuses to be solved, that some stories are meant to stay unfinished. The enduring questions keep multiplying instead of getting answered. Did Captain Briggs make a rational decision based on information we don't have? Was there a moment when they realized they'd made a fatal mistake? Did they die quickly or spend days hoping for rescue? Were they afraid? Did Sarah hold Sophia as the end approached? These aren't just historical questions, they're human questions, about choices and consequences and how quickly life can change direction. The Mary Celeste forces us to confront how little control we actually have over our own stories. Here's how legends outlive facts. The true story of the Mary Celeste is probably mundane. Cargo fumes, momentary panic, a lifeboat that couldn't make it back to the ship. But that's not the story that survived. The story that survived involves steaming tea and mysterious swords and supernatural disappearances. Because mystery is more compelling than mundane reality, we prefer our legends impossible rather than simply tragic. The Mary Celeste became immortal by being inexplicable. If we ever definitively solved the mystery, it would stop being the Mary Celeste and become just another maritime accident. So here we are, 150 years later, still talking about a ship that drifted empty through the Atlantic for a few weeks in 1872. Captain Briggs couldn't have known that abandoning his vessel would create a legend that outlasted every other ship of his era. The Mary Celeste transcended its wooden hull and canvas sails to become something larger, a symbol, a mystery, a reminder that some stories are too powerful to die, even when everyone in them already has. The ghost ship sails on, carrying our questions instead of cargo, forever bound for a port it will never reach. Chapter 14. Remembering the Unseen Heroes. You know what gets lost in all the theories and speculation? The people. Real people with real lives who woke up that November morning thinking they were heading to Genoa. Captain Benjamin Briggs wasn't just some mysterious figure in a maritime legend. He was a guy from Marion, Massachusetts, 37 years old, had been sailing since he was a teenager. This was his second command of the Mary Celeste. Benjamin came from a seafaring family. His father was a sea captain, his brothers too. But here's what made this voyage different. He brought his family along. His wife Sarah, their 2-year-old daughter Sophia. Sarah had sailed with him before. She wasn't some landlubber afraid of the ocean. She knew ships, knew the risks, still chose to come. Picture that decision. A young mother packing for months at sea with a toddler. Sarah Elizabeth Briggs was 29, from New York originally. She'd already lost one child, a son named Arthur who died in infancy 3 years earlier. So when she held little Sophia on deck watching the New York harbor fade away, she was holding everything precious in her world. A mother who'd known loss, who understood how fragile life could be, yet she trusted the sea, trusted her husband, trusted that ship. Then there's Sophia, 2 years old, just learning to talk, probably calling the crew uncles, running around those wooden decks in her little dress, maybe chasing the ship's cat if they had one. What did she make of all that water? Did she laugh at the dolphins? Did the sound of waves put her to sleep in her mother's arms? She'll be forever too in our minds, forever curious, forever innocent. The crew, 7 men whose names history barely remembers. First mate Albert Richardson from Stockton Springs, Maine, 28 years old. Second mate Andrew Gilling from New York, 25. Brothers Volkert and Boz Lorenzen from Germany. Arian Martins, also German. Gottlieb Goodschall, Edward Head from New York. Working men, sailors who signed up for what should have been a routine Atlantic crossing. They trusted Briggs, respected him. Think about their last morning. Someone made coffee, someone checked the rigging. Maybe Sophia toddles up on deck, still sleepy, reaching for her father. Sarah probably worried about the weather. Mothers do that. The crew goes about their routine, adjusting sails, checking cargo, making notes in the log. November 25th, 1872. Just another day, until it wasn't. Until something happened that changed everything. Something we'll never understand. What were they thinking in those final moments? Did they see something coming? A sudden storm? Rising water? Or was it gradual, growing concern about the cargo fumes? Maybe discussion between Benjamin and his officers about whether they should, what? Launch the lifeboat? Get some distance from the ship? Was it panic or careful calculation? We want to believe it was quick, that they didn't suffer, that little Sophia didn't understand. Benjamin Briggs had made this kind of voyage dozens of times. He wasn't reckless, wasn't the type to abandon ship without serious cause. So what convinced this experienced captain to leave his vessel? What made him think putting his wife and baby daughter in a small boat was safer than staying aboard? The man had navigated storms, dealt with difficult cargo, handled crew problems. Something unprecedented happened that day. Picture Sarah gathering a few things, maybe Sophia's favorite blanket, some food, whatever she could carry. Did she hesitate? Did she ask Benjamin if they were doing the right thing? Did she look back at the cabin where they'd been living for weeks, their temporary home on the Atlantic? The mother in her must have been terrified, but she trusted her husband's judgment. She followed him to that lifeboat. The crew would have moved quickly once the decision was made. These were professional sailors. They knew how to launch a boat, how to secure supplies, how to handle an emergency. But they were also human, scared, maybe, confused about why they were leaving a perfectly good ship, looking to their captain for reassurance, following orders even when those orders didn't make complete sense, trusting Briggs, because that's what sailors do. 10 people in a small boat on the North Atlantic in late November. Cold water, grey skies, the Mary Celeste getting smaller behind them. Maybe they planned to stay close. Maybe the rope connecting them to the ship snapped in rough seas. Maybe the wind pushed them apart faster than expected. Whatever happened next, it happened to a family, a toddler, working men just trying to make a living, real people with hopes and plans. Back home, families waited. Benjamin's mother in Massachusetts, Sarah's relatives in New York, the crew members' wives, parents, children. December turned to January. No word, no ship arriving in Genoa. Then the impossible news, the Mary Celeste found empty, sailing alone, their loved ones simply gone. No bodies to bury, no final letters to read, no answers, just absence, just the terrible not knowing. 150 years later, we still tell their story. But sometimes we forget they were people first, mystery second. Benjamin, Sarah, little Sophia, and those 7 sailors, they didn't choose to become legends. They were just trying to cross an ocean. They trusted their ship, their captain, their decisions. The sea had other plans. The Atlantic keeps its secrets, but we can remember the people who disappeared into those waters. So when you hear about the Mary Celeste, Remember Benjamin Briggs checking his compass one last time. Remember Sarah holding Sophia against the morning cold. Remember 7 sailors who deserved better than becoming footnotes in a ghost story. They lived. They loved. They made the best decisions they could with the information they had. The mystery may never be solved, but their humanity, that should never be forgotten. They were not unseen, not to us. Chapter 15. In the end, the sea keeps its secrets. 150 years later, we're still here, still wondering, still trying to piece together those final moments aboard the Mary Celeste. But maybe that's exactly how it should be. Some mysteries aren't meant to be solved, some questions don't have answers, and sometimes the sea decides what stories get told, and which ones stay buried in salt water and time. We've followed every theory, examined every clue, walked through that abandoned ship in our minds 1,000 times, the breakfast still on the table, the captain's bed still made, little Sophia's toys scattered in the cabin, but for all our investigation, all our rational explanations, we still don't really know what happened in those final hours. The sea saw it all, and the sea isn't talking. Think about Benjamin Briggs for a moment. 37 years old, experienced captain, devoted husband, loving father. He'd made this crossing before. He knew these waters. He wasn't the type to panic or make rash decisions, yet something convinced him to abandon a perfectly seaworthy ship. Something urgent enough to take his wife and 2-year-old daughter into a lifeboat in the middle of the Atlantic. We'll never know what that something was. Sarah Briggs had been hesitant about this voyage. She'd written to her mother about her concerns, but she trusted her husband, loved him enough to follow him across dangerous waters with their baby daughter. In her final letter, she seemed optimistic, looking forward to their new life in Italy. She had no idea she was sailing toward legend, toward becoming part of maritime history's greatest mystery. Little Sophia Briggs, 2 years old, just learning to walk properly, just starting to talk in full sentences. Her toys were found scattered in the captain's cabin. A child's presence on that ghost ship somehow makes the mystery even more heartbreaking. What did she see in those final moments? Did she understand the danger? Was she frightened? The sea keeps her story too. Forever 2 years old. Forever lost. The 7 crew members each had families waiting back home. Mothers who watched the harbour for ships that would never return. Wives who kept dinner warm for men who would never walk through their doors again. Children who grew up without fathers. The Mary Celeste didn't just take 10 people. It took entire futures, entire families, and left behind only questions carved deep as shipwrecks. Captain Morehouse and his crew aboard the DEI Gratia. They thought they were performing a simple salvage operation, maybe earning some extra money for their trouble. They had no idea they were about to become part of history's most enduring maritime mystery. No idea that their discovery would spawn 150 years of theories, books, movies. They just saw a ship sailing strangely and decided to investigate. The rational explanations make sense. Alcohol fumes building up in the hold. Fear of explosion. Temporary abandonment while the air cleared. A broken tow rope leaving them stranded in the lifeboat. It's logical, reasonable, probably what actually happened. But logic doesn't explain why no bodies were ever found, why the lifeboat vanished without a trace, why 10 people could disappear so completely from the face of the earth. Maybe the real mystery isn't what happened to the Mary Celeste. Maybe it's why we need to know so badly, why we can't let it go, why a single abandoned ship has captured imaginations for a century and a half. There's something about unsolved mysteries that calls to us, something about the unknown that both terrifies and fascinates. The Mary Celeste became a mirror reflecting our own deepest fears about the ocean. The sea is vast, incomprehensibly vast. We've mapped maybe 20% of the ocean floor. We know more about the surface of Mars than we do about the deepest parts of our own planet. So when 10 people vanish into that immensity, when they leave no trace, no final message, no goodbye, it reminds us how small we really are, how little we actually control. Over the years, the Mary Celeste story grew. Details were added that never happened. Hot meals on the table, tea still warm, pipes still smoking. None of it true, but somehow the legend needed those touches, needed the story to be more mysterious, more impossible than it already was, as if the real mystery wasn't mysterious enough, as if losing 10 people to the sea wasn't tragedy enough. The ship itself sailed on for years, renamed, repurposed, working different routes under different flags, but it carried the weight of its history. Sailors whispered about bad luck, about curses, about ghost ships that steal souls. Eventually it was run aground deliberately, scuttled, as if the only way to break the curse was to let the sea finally claim what it had been reaching for all along. Tonight, somewhere in the Atlantic, waves still roll over the spot where the Mary Celeste was found that December morning in 1872. The water looks the same, feels the same, but it holds secrets now. 10 souls who trusted the ocean with their lives and discovered too late that the ocean keeps what it takes. Their story lives on because their ending never came, because some mysteries are meant to endure, so we remember them. Captain Benjamin Briggs, brave and careful. Sarah Briggs, devoted wife and mother. Little Sophia, barely old enough to understand the world she was leaving behind. The 7 crew members whose names history recorded, but whose stories remain untold. They sailed into legend on a November morning in 1872, and somewhere in the deep Atlantic darkness, the sea keeps their secrets still.